So, based on what all the climatological models are stating at this point, the most likely scenario is that we're going to be in a weak La Nina by the time we approach the winter time frame. And you're probably wondering, what does that mean when it comes to the amount of snowfall you should expect in the United States? Well, if we were to take a look at the typical snowfall anomaly map during weak La Nina years between the years of 1951 through 2009, we clearly see a difference when it comes to the amount of snowfall, where the northern portions of the United States like North Dakota, South Dakota, Minnesota, extending into Iowa, Nebraska, all typically experience more snowfall than usual. And when it comes to the magnitude, the difference when it comes to snowfall ranges anywhere between 4 to 12 inches, which could be considered a lot in some of these areas, because you have to think about that could be, let's say, another 2 or 3 snowstorms that you see more than usual during the winter time frame when we're talking about a difference between 4 to 12 inches in terms of how much more snowfall you should expect. And then for the Pacific Northwest as well, you also typically receive more snowfall than usual, also typically in excess between 4 to 12 inches being the difference, which of course could be considered a lot in some of these areas, especially where you don't necessarily experience a ton of snowfall. And same goes for portions of the Northeast. Now, typically during La Ninas, more specifically in the mid-Atlantic, we see actually a snowfall deficit, but during weak La Ninas, there is a bit of a difference. In the mid-Atlantic, we don't really see a strong anomaly at all when it comes to snowfall, if there is at all, as for the most part the snowfall ranges around average right over the mid-Atlantic states, such as Maryland and Virginia, and including cities like Philadelphia and New York City. But we do see over New England and the interior Northeast, you experience a little bit more snowfall than usual, which should play a big role in terms of how many snowstorms you will receive, as well as just the overall total amount of snowfall. So in the northern portions of the United States, based on the fact that we're going to be in a weak La Nina, I would expect that there's going to be more snowstorms than usual and more snowfall than usual. But we're going to take a look at other factors before we can jump to that conclusion immediately, because of course there are still other factors that play a role in terms of how much snowfall you receive. So we're going to take a look at that, and then taking a look further southward, we don't really see much of any snowfall anomaly outside, with the exception of the southern Rocky Mountain ranges, including New Mexico, western Texas, and even into portions of Colorado and western Kansas and Nebraska. We do see a snowfall deficit during weak La Nina years, as the range could be anywhere between 2 to 4 inches less of snowfall. Of course, every winter is different, so there could even be years where you do receive more snowfall than usual during a weak La Nina, despite the average being that you typically receive less snowfall. So of course it isn't just you can't really take this as an actual fact that there's going to be less snowfall. Just expect a more likely chance you're going to see less snowfall over a lot of these southwestern states. So definitely go into the winter with that type of mindset. So here's a quick look at what typically happens during a La Nina, and as you can see, for the Pacific Northwest, it's typically more wet and cool than usual, which makes sense why during a La Nina you typically receive more snowfall than usual. And then it's also more wet for the Ohio River Valley, which includes states like Kentucky, Ohio, and Indiana. So it also makes sense in those areas why during you do receive typically more snowfall than usual. However, what's interesting is that in a lot of these areas as well, it's typically also warmer than usual, but you have to keep in mind that this is assuming that this La Nina is at least in a moderate phase, and different strengths of a La Nina bring different conditions. So the fact that we're going to be in a weak La Nina means that this map that you see right here outlining the conditions you should expect this winter in each area might not be 100% what you will see this winter, because a weak La Nina is fairly different compared to other La Nina strengths, such as a strong and a moderate La Nina. So we're going to take a look more in detail what a weak La Nina typically brings, because this map might be a little bit misleading to some folks who just assume that the conditions are going to be just like this just because we're going to be in a La Nina. There's different strengths we need to consider to really consider what conditions we're going to experience this winter. So here's a temperature anomaly map for weak La Nina years versus a long-term average between 1991 and 2020, and we see a clear indication that it's much colder, typically much colder than usual during weak La Nina years, where the average temperature ranges anywhere between 3 to 4 degrees below normal when it comes to Fahrenheit, which could be feel like a pretty big difference, especially during certain cold spells that might move through during weak La Nina years. So this should contribute to this area experiencing more snowfall than usual due to the cooler temperatures, and we even see the cooler temperatures move a little bit further southward to a lesser extent, but still it is typically slightly cooler than normal during weak La Nina. La Ninas during for the southwestern United States, and then for the east coast United States, interestingly enough, it's mainly average when it comes to temperature. We do have a slight anomaly where temperature is slightly above average over the southeast, which is very reminiscent of what we see during a regular La Nina, so not much differences there. However, the anomaly when it comes to how much warmer than average it is for the southeast, as well as the Ohio Valley, is definitely weaker during weak La Nina compared to what we see during a normal La Nina. So that's something to consider, that the temperature anomalies, while they might be warmer than average this winter, it might not be so much warmer than usual like you'd experience during a moderate or stronger La Nina. So you want to take that into consideration as well, that the temperatures could very well just hover around average for much of the winter time frame for the southeast as well as the northeast. Now, combining the temperature anomaly forecasts with the precipitation anomalies for weak La Ninas, we see that it's typically much drier right up along the western portion of the United States. Right up along the Pacific Northwest coast, there could be that possibility you do experience a little bit less snowfall than usual, so definitely keep that in mind. But I think that the cooler than average temperatures you do experience in a lot of these areas in the Pacific Northwest should sort of cancel it out, so I still do expect more snowfall than usual overall this winter for the Pacific Northwest and extending into the northern Midwest as well. We do also see some drier than normal conditions right over Florida more specifically, but Florida mostly in almost every year does not experience any snowfall, so pretty much whether it's warmer or even cooler than average, it's highly unlikely you're going to experience snowfall. But I think this should, and also the Mid-Atlantic does have somewhat of a small precipitation anomaly when it comes to weak La Ninas, but I don't see that this anomaly is really strong enough for me to confidently say that, hey, you're going to experience less snowstorms than usual, because the anomaly is very weak. You're slightly more likely to experience a drier winter than normal, but it isn't a very strong anomaly to the point where I'd confidently say that, or really depend on this winter being drier than normal, as you could still very well see a winter with average precipitation or a little bit more precipitation than you'd expect for a La Nina. So for the Mid-Atlantic, I'd expect mainly average conditions, but we're going to take a look at other factors as well that should help indicate if this winter will bring more snowstorms than usual or not. So let's see what the computer models are stating when it comes to the long-term precipitation anomaly forecast. So this encompasses the months of December, January, and February. And as you can see, the Ohio Valley as well as the Great Lakes region is expected to receive slightly more precipitation than usual, while the Pacific Northwest as well is also experiencing much higher precipitation than usual, which is somewhat typical of what we see during a La Nina. And for the southern United States, we see that it's clearly much drier than normal, which of course also is another feature that's associated with La Nina. So as a result of this, I do expect the chance of snowfall to be less likely for the southern United States. So if you're in the southeast, unfortunately, if you're hoping for snowfall, this year might not bring the best chances of it due to the fact that it's expected to be a little bit drier than normal, especially since during La Nina years, we typically see the conditions be a little bit drier than normal. Although the weak La Nina years didn't show a strong anomaly, it still leans a little bit more to the idea that it's slightly drier than what you typically see during any given winter. So for the southeast, I do think that that will contribute to the lesser chance of snowfall in those areas. And then for the northern United States, the chance of snowfall should be higher thanks to this, thanks to the fact that typically the computer models are expecting more precipitation than usual. So I do think that that will contribute to the increased amount of snowstorms in the northern United States. So taking a look at the temperature anomaly for the 3-month average between December and February 2025, we clearly see that the MMME model, which combines a lot of the most reliable computer models into one model to give the most accurate representation when it comes to temperature anomalies. Of course, it isn't perfect, especially when we're talking about something that's so far in the long term. We clearly see that it's expected to be warmer than usual for pretty much the vast majority of the United States, with the exception being the Pacific Northwest and the Northern Midwest, where it's this computer model is expecting temperatures to remain around average, but I'll lean a little bit more to temperatures being below average in a lot of these areas, thanks to the fact that due to the fact that the weak La Nina would typically bring those conditions in those areas. So I do expect that will contribute to a lot more snowfall than usual this winter. And then for much of the United States, especially for the southern United States, this should also contribute to a weaker chance of snowfall this winter. And then for the areas a little bit further northward, we see that northeast is expected to be in on some of the warmer than average temperatures. But again, the anomaly isn't as strong as what we see a little bit further southward. So I could easily see the temperatures hovering a little bit closer to average. So you'd see mostly average snowfall, I'd say, based on what I'm seeing. It doesn't seem like the temperatures will be so much above average, but since we're in a weak La Nina, it won't be so much below average either. So I'm expecting around average temperature and precipitation for much of the northeast, more specifically the mid-Atlantic states and Interstate 95 corridor cities. So I'd expect mainly average snowfall in those areas, while for the rest of the northern United States, you should expect more snowfall in those areas. Another thing I want to point out is the drought monitor, and as you can see, much of the western United States is currently under somewhat of a severe drought, especially in portions of the Pacific Northwest. However, I do expect that to go away because a La Nina pattern, once it takes shape, it definitely changes the type of conditions you see throughout the United States. So despite the fact that it's drier than normal now, I expect that to change once a La Nina kicks in and brings a strong Pacific jet right through this area to bring much needed moisture, and I think that should be able to cancel out this drought and still bring more snowfall than what you typically see during any given winter. And then for the eastern United States, we see that the drought isn't very strong, with the exception of West Virginia. So what I do believe is that since there's going to be a little bit more ridging than usual right here, at least early on, that should bring more lower pressures to the eastern half of the United States that I think should bring a little bit more moisture than what you'd expect during the winter time frame for the Northeast as well as the Great Lakes region. So I think that the snowfall will be higher than normal thanks to that as well, compounding a weak La Nina. So definitely keep that in mind as we approach the winter time frame. So here's my snowfall forecast for the entirety of the United States. So I accounted for the average snowfall in each area. So for the higher elevations of the Rocky Mountain ranges, as well as the interior Northeast and the interior Great Lakes region, I'm expecting you guys to receive over 80 inches of snowfall. Now, this area is a little bit larger right over the Rocky Mountain ranges, mainly because I do expect the heavier snowfall to move a little bit further outside the higher elevations to impact the areas in the lower elevations a bit more, thanks to the cooler temperatures that are expected for this winter thanks to weak La Nina. So definitely expect more snowfall in a lot of these areas, as it should be very good for skiing and snowboarding this winter thanks to the higher amount of snowfall you should expect. Because like the snowfall anomaly map for weak La Nina showed, you're typically on average expected to receive anywhere between 4 to 12 inches of snowfall more in a lot of these areas, and I think that should contribute to the 80-inch area being a little bit larger for a lot of the northern United States than usual. And then for the areas under the 60 to 80-inch range, which is in the dark purple, I'm also expecting it to be a little bit larger this season thanks to the higher than usual snowfall that's expected in a lot of these areas. So Montana, Wyoming, Idaho, Utah, and extending into portions of Colorado, expect more snowfall than usual, anywhere between 60 to 80 inches. So it should be a pretty rough winter. And same goes for the interior Great Lakes. This area of 60 to 80 inches is definitely a lot larger than usual. So in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Minnesota, expect a lot of snow this winter, more than usual. And then same goes for the Northeast as well, where just north of Boston, you should expect 60 to 80 inches of snowfall. And this includes places like Albany as well, and the Pocono Mountains of Pennsylvania. Definitely watch out for that. Just south of that, I'm expecting 40 to 60 inches of snowfall. This is also more than usual in a lot of these areas like Des Moines, Minneapolis, and this even includes Milwaukee. Thanks as like I've been saying this entire video, we're gonna see a lot more snowfall in the northern United States. So the 40 to 60 inch range will be a lot larger overall and will impact the areas a little bit further southward where you typically don't experience 40 to 60 inches of snow in any given year. And this includes Boston as well as northern Connecticut. So Hartford could get involved with 40 to 60 inches of snowfall this year, and even as far south as the northwestern portion of New Jersey, which is bordering the New York City metropolitan area. And then for the areas further southward, you should expect 30 to 40 inches. So this is going to be right over Chicago, which is what more than what you typically see in Chicago. This extends into Kansas and southern Nebraska as well. This includes Cleveland as well. And then for the Northeast, we see that area is very narrow. Now, anywhere that's in the 30 to 40 inch range and just south, that's where I expect the snowfall to mainly be average right over the Northeast, thanks to the fact that during weak La Ninas, we typically don't see a strong anomaly when it comes to snowfall this year. So I do expect the snowfall to be relatively around average. There could also be that possibility that it might be slightly warmer than usual, which could limit the potential snowfall, despite the fact that the interior Northeast would experience a little bit more. So for areas like New York City, Philadelphia, and Washington, D.C., that's where I expect 20 to 30 inches of snowfall, which is typically what you experience in any given winter for those cities. And then this extends into Indianapolis as well. St. Louis is right on the border of 20 to 30 inches of snowfall, which is more than what you typically see, so keep that in mind. Just south of that, I expect 10 to 20 inches of snowfall. And then we see that for the southern United States, this is where you should expect anywhere between 1 to 10 inches of snowfall. So Charlotte could get involved with maybe an inch of snowfall, but I'll say anywhere that's south of Dallas, it's going to be highly unlikely you're going to experience accumulating snowfall this year, as I think that it's going to be just a little bit too dry and a little bit too warm this winter. But again, weather is unpredictable. There's still that possibility we could have that one snowstorm that moves further southward, but the chances of that is less likely this winter. So this is my overall snowfall forecast for the 2024-2025 winter season. If you want even more in detail forecasts regarding the snowfall in your specific location, just make sure to comment down below your specific area, and I'll make sure to give you guys a more in detail outlook when it comes to the amount of snowfall you should expect in your area. So comment down below if you're interested. But that's it for now, guys, and I thank you guys for watching.